Are you ready to discuss some opposing viewpoints? This video is all about adult children cutting off their parents. This is the 2.0 version. I'm going to be talking about the difference between creating boundaries versus bolstering. So I'm Nicholeen Peck. I teach parenting all over the world. I teach good communication, how to build strong family bonds, child development, education. That's my wheelhouse. In this video, we're talking about the parent-child bond and communication that happens once the child hits adulthood or is going into early adulthood. I made a video some months back called Adult Children Cutting Off Their Parents. And maybe it was even called Why Are Adult Children Cutting Off Their Parents? And a lot of people watched this video. In fact, it got a lot of viewers really fast. There were a lot of people liking it and giving it thumbs up. People reaching out personally to me through my website, through the teachingselfgovernment.com website, and saying, wow, thank you. That is just what I needed. But there also were a lot of comments that were not in favor. Some people saying, I liked the video at first, but then I didn't like the video. And some people saying, well, this isn't true because so many parents are narcissistic and I've had abuse, so this isn't true. I spent some time in this video discussing things that really are beneficial to families, but I'd like to discuss the opposing viewpoints now. Where are these people coming from? What do we need to understand from some of these comments? And then also, what else has been brought to my attention in this conversation recently as I've been meeting with parents, but also as I've been reading a new, very popular best-selling book that I think will add some insight to this issue as well. So let's go ahead and talk about that parent-child dynamic once the child is an adult. In the original video, I first started talking about why people are cutting off their parents, or that it is happening a lot. And I presented some different reasons for the phenomenon, which we actually have happening in Western culture right now, where children, once they are getting close to adulthood or reaching adulthood, are actually cutting their parents out of their lives and not opening up to them, not talking to them. And while developmentally it is normal for a person to gain more and more autonomy and start to make more of their own life decisions for themselves, there is almost this like divorce type culture where children are in essence pushing their parents completely away, being completely closed to them, sometimes not even talking to them for periods of years, sometimes not even allowing their parents to have relationships with their grandchildren, which is actually detrimental to the next generation. There is data about that. Children who have interaction with grandparents, even if grandparents are not perfect, have a greater, more healthy sense of self. They actually see full life in a better view. They're also able to solve their problems better because they have other close examples of people around them solving problems. They feel more attached and loving toward all of their family members instead of just their parents. And that's also healthy for them as they're going to have other families that they will head later on in their lives. There are some of these things that are happening, and it's kind of phenomenon. The thing is in the first video, so the 1.0 video of why are adult children distancing themselves from their parents, everyone seemed to agree. Even in the comments, the negative comments, there were people who were agreeing it's true that people are distancing themselves. The fact that there were so many comments actually is proof that so many people are distancing themselves from their parents and that there are issues. This is a real issue that modern families are facing in Western culture. But what I've noticed is it's not just Western culture anymore. It's starting to spill out to the world because as media ends up influencing the entire planet. Some of the ideas of different cultures end up spreading, right? And so this phenomenon in Western culture is now starting to spread into other cultures as well. And parents, families, even the young adults who are starting to make these decisions really aren't prepared for what they're doing. It's an incredible experiment, and it actually could lead to some very difficult things for them. In the original video, I talked about technology's impact on this detachment from adult children and their parents with each other, and some of the messaging that is out there that is pushing young people to think of their parents and parental authority in general as something that is an attack to their freedom. Now, this is kind of taking one healthy thing and then blowing it out of proportion so that it then becomes not healthy. So it is healthy for a young adult or young person to decide that they need to start to decide who they are, how they are going to live their lives. They need to make decisions for themselves and not have to worry about what somebody else is telling them to do all the time. This is part of becoming an adult. This is a healthy thing that happens. However, what is happening in this instance online is people are saying you just can't trust them. Because they care about you, they are controlling. Because they give you advice, they are controlling. That is narcissistic. Those types of things are being said online, and that is very confusing. In fact, it is downright dishonest for people to be presenting that to young people, even though in some cases there may be a narcissistic parent or an emotionally immature parent. That can be the case, but does that mean that you try to control your parent? I don't think that's a good idea. So in that original video, I also talked about control, and I said, okay, so there's an irony that people are feeling out of control in their lives, and there's a lot of things going on and that they're trying to sort through. They think that controlling their parents is the solution. So if they can keep them controlled or put boundaries up for their parents, then they will be able to feel more in control of themselves. But the irony is it's not necessarily working. In fact, it usually leads to a whole bunch of other problems that come with being isolated and not having a support network and not feeling like you have a full sense of identity because you're detaching yourself from your history and your family's history, among many other things. You don't have the person who has known you the longest, who understands you the most, to help you sort through some of those life's problems when your prefrontal cortex might not actually be fully developed yet. Now, should you try to solve all your problems? Yeah, go for it. Always try. But occasionally, a person needs to talk to somebody about their problems, and if your prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed yet, the natural, most logical person to talk to is somebody who's been there before, which usually is your parents and your grandparents, those people in your extended family. So then I talk about using the skill disagreeing appropriately and how important that is, how you can disagree with your parents and grandparents and other people that have raised you. You don't have to believe every single thing they say. There's no rule that says that. Of course, they would love it, but you don't have to go around telling yourself that you're a disappointment to them just because you don't agree with them. They may not consider you a disappointment to them. You could make completely different life choices. You could have a different faith. You could have a different way of looking at politics and ideological things. They actually could be like, okay, well, I don't see it that way. It is kind of sad that we can't share that in common, but they might say, but I completely respect that you have to make that decision for yourself. Inside their heart, they may be focusing on trying to love you despite the differences. I think that an adult child should be trying to love their parents despite differences too, instead of expecting the parent to believe everything that they think. If you've already subscribed to this channel, then you know I talk a lot about self-government and what that means to govern yourself. So originally I talked about disagreeing appropriately and being able to discuss with someone in a way that shares you both have a different point of view, but you're still open-minded enough to listen to each other, talk to each other, and look past it. A good, healthy relationship with parents can even handle emotional outbursts, can even handle bad behavior. Think about that. If you are going to successfully navigate any relationship, whether it's at work, with your friends, or with family. You have to be able to tolerate and adapt and get through somebody else's bad behavior sometimes. A person could never even be a parent if they didn't know that they could get through somebody else's bad behavior, because every single child, when they are developing, has bad behavior. So hopefully your parents have already learned how to get through bad behavior. Hopefully they didn't coddle you to a point that you and they think that there's only one option, and that is good behavior, because a person can always choose to have bad behavior. So what do you do about that? Let's say you call your mother. I know mothers are always the target of so many things because they just say stuff to their children. Their whole lives they've been saying stuff to their children. There's jokes about dad, there's dad jokes, and then there's jokes about mom, and there's attacks on mom and attacks on dad. You know what? Parents know that. They know that they will be disregarded sometimes. They know that they will be talked bad about sometimes. They know that. That doesn't mean you need to spend your time talking bad about them, but if it happens, they're not going to take it personally. So if they happen to mention something about you to somebody else, you shouldn't take it personally either. They've been doing it your whole life. They've been talking to their spouse, they've been talking to their parent, saying, hey, what do I do about this? Hey, what do I do about this? Or have you seen this before? What do you know about this? Or hey, I'm concerned about them. Can you pray for them? That's not an attack on you. That's in an effort to try to be able to help you. Parents have historically always done to help their children. And as a society, we are saying that is over the line. That is too much in my business. If you didn't want your business to be known, you'd have to go and completely isolate yourself. Maybe that's why people do pull away from their parents. They want to be isolated so that nobody knows their business. But that's just a control tactic. If you want to have a relationship, you've got to put up with a few things sometimes. So let's say mom tells something to you that you don't like. Let's say she tells you, you know what? You are not being kind to your family members. You are being judgmental to your family members. You need to stop it. People are getting annoyed when they're around you. Now, that type of feedback is incredibly honest. It is incredibly straightforward. It's the type of feedback that a mother should be able to give. Now, I don't agree with the tone that I'm presenting here. In fact, if I were to talk to my children about it, I would definitely do it with a more disagree appropriately tone. I talk about that skill on this website. There's other videos you can look up to find more about that. I'm not going to get into that here, but I would use a tone of understanding. But let's say they even don't, because people aren't perfect and not everybody knows the skill disagreeing appropriately. Then if you really care about your family and you really care about your relationships, then you know what you would do? You would actually say, okay, mom, I don't like the way this conversation is going, so you know what? We're going to hang up now, and we'll call you later. We'll talk to you later. You might even get mad at your mom because you don't know skills. You might even just hang up on your mom because you don't know certain skills. But you know what? If you had a good mindset when it comes to family, a healthy one, then you would be able to call her back 10 minutes later and say, sorry, or say, hey, listen, that really didn't go well. Can we talk about this more productively? Or at the very least, you could call her up and say, hey, you know what? I've got this birthday party that I'm planning. I've got to make this certain kind of cake. I know you've made it before. Can you give me the recipe for that? You can just, like, even at the very least, brush it aside and say, I'm not going to let that one incident define my relationship. How fragile would that be? I'm not going to do that. So recently I have read a book that really goes into this dynamic of why adult children are disenfranchising themselves from their parents. And I feel the book is worth a mention. I do not agree with everything in the book. There are a few stances, a few nuances and tones that I definitely don't agree with because they come from a place that principally I can't agree with. So I do like principles, which means I narrow down to, okay, where is the full truth? But I do think there are tons of truths brought up in this book. So the book that I'm talking about is this one. The book is called Bad Therapy, and it's by Abigail Shrier. She is a New York Times best-selling author. She also used to be a journalist. She knows how to do her research. She's not afraid of getting answers that she wasn't looking for to her questions, which really is very different from a lot of people who do research and write books. Many people who do research go into it with an idea they're hoping to prove, and they're afraid of finding anything else that they might not agree with. She's not. I love it. So I have to give her credit, even when she advocates for spanking and I don't, because I know it's not necessary, because I actually have proof. I can agree with her on the fact that she does not advocate for coddling. She's very, very critical of it and says it's damaging children. It's causing a lot of problems. In fact, if you're a parent watching this, you need to know that coddling is one of the things that leads adult children to pull back from you. When you've coddled them for many years in the past, then they hit adulthood and you're still trying to chime in on everything. That's one of the things that makes them pull away from you. They don't want to be micromanaged anymore, and they want to see if they can do something on their own. So wise parents, as they're raising their children, end up creating an environment that's really healthy by giving their children opportunities to try things, learn some things with trial and error, solve some problems themselves. And you know, if you're familiar with this channel, we talk about that all the time here, how to help children learn to do problem solving, to self-motivate, to actually be self-governing themselves. So in her book, Shrier talks about the impacts of our therapeutic culture. And I have to say that I agree with her. I have a lot of friends who are therapists, psychologists, some of them who've even been trained by me in the teaching self-government communication structure for families so that they can teach it in their practices. And they say that therapy can hurt, therapy can harm, and not help. And I think a lot of parents are assuming that if they put their child in therapy, everything's going to be fine. Oh, we're going through a divorce. I'm going to for sure just put the child in therapy. My child's struggling socially at school. I'm going to put him in therapy. My child won't get up in the morning. I'm going to put him in therapy. They push the therapy for everything. They keep a therapist on a retainer. And by the way, for therapy, I mean, that's easy money for that therapist. For the rest of that child's upbringing, they're going to be on retainer. Holy cow. You know what message this gives to the child? I love that Shrier brings this up in her book. The message that it gives is that parents don't know what they're doing. The parent is saying, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to take you to somebody who knows more than me. So the unspoken message there is, I don't know what to do and I can't help you solve your problems. It's going to have to come from someone else. Well, then no wonder that the child would turn to somebody else. Let's also think of the therapeutic arrangement. When a person is sitting there in therapy with another person, they are showing up once a week or once a month or however often they go. They are being told, tell us all the bad things that are happening in your life. It's like a negative view of their life. They are supposed to find the bad things. They are basically told in an unspoken message that your life is only going good if you are focusing on the bad things in your life. That's crazy. And then to boot, for a child, who or what makes the bad moments in their life, the hard moments? Usually it's an interaction they've had with their parents, or their parents are telling them, you can't do this, or you're overreacting, you're disrespecting, you know, those types of things. And the child doesn't want to hear it. So you know what they do? They go tell the therapist. So then the therapist becomes their friend in gossip against the parents for how many years? Sometimes this even doesn't begin until a person reaches adulthood, but they start trying to staff the things with their parents. They end up just going to gossip about the parents. The therapist wants to be relevant for the person that they're talking to, plus they want to keep getting paid because they don't have any intention of ending the therapy, because why would they? That's their job. So then they start telling the child things that they feel like they're looking for. Yeah, they're probably a narcissist. Yeah, they're probably... Never mind the fact that the therapist has never met the parent. The therapist is declaring the parent a narcissist, or that they're emotionally immature or something like that, or reactive, when they have never met them. That should be suspect to any person in therapy. A person who has never met another cannot diagnose them with something. That's just how it is. Plus, you have to reach a really high bar to really be a bona fide narcissist. You may have one or two tendencies, but you're not a narcissist unless there's all these other things. She also talks about the therapeutic culture that's in schools, that's online, the social emotional learning culture, the trauma-informed care culture. She talks about the difference between trauma and adversity and how everything is being categorized as trauma right now. And so people are not able to move on from their problems. So they are immediately led down this pathway to find your trauma. Everyone's got to have it. Everyone has trauma. What have you perceived as trauma in your life? Find it, search for it. And she even has done her research on where this comes from. And it's actually based upon fraudulent, inaccurate studies that have become popularized in the therapeutic world. And really, truly, she sheds a beautiful light. So parents, you know what? Rethink therapy. Rethink it. Children can solve most of their problems with you. If your child has started therapy, you have to ask yourself, since they started that therapy, what has happened to our relationship since? Has it become stronger or gotten worse? Well, that's going to tell you what's going on in that therapy office, maybe. I wouldn't pay for something that's doing that to my child. And you might have to have a hard conversation with your child. Hey, are you spending time talking bad about me to your therapist? Because whenever you talk bad about somebody else and you gossip in that way, and you don't actually ever talk to the person about it, then you have to hold that negative feeling about me all the time. You didn't get it out, you created it maybe even. You know, you might have to have a loving conversation with them. I'm not going to go into strategies for how to fix the relationship right now. I definitely talked about that in my last video, which was the 1.0 version of this. I didn't label it 1.0, but the first version, which was called Adult Children Cutting Off Their Parents. So definitely go there and, you know, see if you can get some strategies there. There's also so many more things on this channel that can help you. One of the biggest things that I think could really be beneficial to you, and quite frankly, if you are on either side of this conversation, whether you are the adult child who's distancing yourself and cutting off your parents, or whether you're the parent that's been cut off, I think we have to come to a place of healing. And we might have to identify the expectation trap that we have for ourselves. There is a full class on this channel called The Expectation Trap versus the Cycle for Success. Every person creates expectation traps for themselves. And we need to be asking ourselves, have we done that? Have we trapped ourselves because of the way we've created our expectations in relationships? It's one thing to set boundaries and to observe certain boundaries out of respect for another person. But if you are setting up boundaries to control, then it could be that your expectations are leading you to a path of destruction for the relationship and maybe even for your own happiness. So be careful about that. So watch the video, The Expectation Trap versus the Cycle for Success next. I think that's going to be the most helpful.